On November 17, 2021, a man walked into a small cookie shop in South Memphis and never walked back out. That man was Adolph Thornton Jr., known to the world as Young Dolph. His death would shake the entire hip-hop world and ignite one of the most talked-about rap feuds in modern Memphis history. What happened inside Makeda's homemade butter cookies that afternoon did not just mark the end of a rapper's life, it exposed years of tension, rivalries, and street politics that had been building behind the scenes for over a decade. The killing of Young Dolph now sits at the center of a Memphis rap war that has led to arrests, convictions, retaliations, and sentences that are still unfolding in courtrooms today. But the story of how Dolph ended up dead inside that cookie shop is not a simple one. It involves two powerful record labels, a rejected deal, years of violent incidents, a $100,000 bounty allegedly placed by the brother of one of Memphis's biggest rap moguls, and a long cycle of retaliation that has left multiple people either dead or serving life sentences. To truly understand what happened, we need to go back to the beginning, to the roots of Memphis rap, the rise of two powerful figures in the city, and the rivalry that would eventually explode into violence. Because the war that took Young Dolph's life did not begin in 2021, it began years earlier. Memphis, the sound and the streets. To understand the conflict between Young Dolph and Yo Gotti, you first have to understand Memphis itself. Memphis rap is a regional subgenre of hip-hop that emerged in the city during the mid to late 1980s. Unlike the polished sound of New York or Los Angeles, Memphis rap developed its own raw identity. The music was often low-budget, gritty, and dark. Artists relied heavily on Roland TR-808 drum machines, repetitive vocal hooks, and minimal synth melodies that created a haunting, lo-fi soundscape. But that sound was not just a style, it reflected the reality of the neighborhoods where the music was born. Memphis has always had its own energy. Dark, heavy, unfiltered, it came from environments that many people would never choose to live in. Early pioneers of the Memphis rap scene included Project Pat, 8-Ball and MJG, and 3-6 Mafia, the latter eventually achieving mainstream success and even winning an Academy Award for Best Original Song. Yet by the 2010s, the conversation around Memphis hip-hop had narrowed down to two dominant names, Yo Gotti and Young Dolph. The rise of Yo Gotti. Yo Gotti, born Mario Mims, had already spent decades building his name in the industry. He was widely considered a Memphis rap legend, standing alongside pioneers like 3-6 Mafia as one of the artists who helped elevate the city's music scene to a national stage. Memphis had long been known primarily as the city of Elvis Presley, but Gotti helped turn it into something different, a city recognized for its thriving rap culture. Through years of grinding in the industry, he built Collective Music Group, better known as CMG, to a powerful record label. Over time, the label would sign successful artists such as Moneybagg Yo, Black Youngsta, Glorilla, and several rising Memphis stars. CMG quickly became one of the most recognizable brands in Southern hip-hop, and Yo Gotti often referred to himself as the King of Memphis. In Memphis, that title meant more than just music. It meant influence, money, respect, and territory, both in the entertainment world and, according to many observers, in the streets as well.
Young Dolph, the independent king. Then there was Young Dolph. Adolph Robert Thornton Jr. was born on July 27, 1985, in Chicago, Illinois. But when he was just 2 years old, his family moved to Memphis, Tennessee, where he grew up in the Castalia Heights neighborhood of South Memphis. Life was far from easy. Dolph's parents struggled with crack cocaine addiction, which meant that much of his upbringing fell to his grandmother, Ida Mae, who became his primary caretaker. Castalia Heights was a small, predominantly black neighborhood in South Memphis, surrounded by railroad tracks and industrial buildings, including a nearby Kellogg's cereal plant. A childhood friend once described the neighborhood as an island inside South Memphis. This was where Dolph's worldview was shaped. Under his grandmother's roof, he lived with discipline. He attended church, he followed curfews, he even served on the church usher board. But outside that house, the streets told a very different story. Dolph would later admit openly that violence had surrounded him from a young age. In an interview with The Guardian, he once said, "I've been a target since I was 17, 18, 19. He never hid where he came from. Dolph acknowledged that growing up in such an environment pushed him toward hustling at a young age. As he explained, when you see something your whole life, eventually you become a part of it. He once summarized it in a line that perfectly captured his mentality. I clocked in when I was 12, and I never clocked out. Turning pain into music. In 2008, tragedy struck again. Shortly after losing his grandmother Ida Mae to lung cancer, Dolph was involved in a serious car accident that nearly killed him. Those experiences forced him to reevaluate his life. With so much chaos around him, Dolph began finding comfort in the one place where he could channel his emotions, the recording studio. Encouraged by friends, he released his first mixtape in 2008, Paper Route Campaign. That project quickly gained popularity in the Memphis streets. That success convinced Dolph to take rap seriously. 2 years later, in 2010, he launched his own independent record label, Paper Route Empire. This decision would become a defining part of his identity. Inspired by entrepreneurs like Master P and Birdman, Dolph believed that owning your masters and building your own label was the only way to truly control your destiny, so he refused to sign to a major label. He refused to sign to another artist's imprint. Instead, he built everything himself. And that independence made him both respected and controversial. Because in Memphis, independence meant you were competing with the biggest power structures in the city, including Yo Gotti's CMG. The deal that started the war. Through the early 2010s, Dolph continued releasing a steady stream of mixtapes, including High-Class Street Music, Blue Magic, South Memphis Kingpin. He also built connections outside Memphis, collaborating with major artists such as Gucci Mane on the mixtape East Atlanta Memphis. Slowly but surely, Dolph was building his own brand. He was building his own movement, and people in Memphis were starting to notice. That is when the two worlds collided. According to many sources, the tension between Dolph and Yo Gotti began around 2014 when Dolph was offered a record deal with CMG. For many artists, signing to Gotti's label would have been a dream opportunity, but Dolph turned it down. Later, during an appearance on Sway in the Morning, he explained why. He said he didn't want to attach himself to another artist's movement. He wanted to build his own path. That rejection allegedly sparked the rivalry between the two rappers. And while both sides have told different versions of the story over the years, most people familiar with Memphis rap agree on the basic timeline. Yo Gotti tried to sign Young Dolph. Young Dolph said no. And from that moment forward, a quiet rivalry began to grow. At first, the tension stayed beneath the surface. Both men continued making music. Both were making money. But Memphis's rap scene is small. Everyone knows everyone. Neighborhood ties run deep. And when two of the biggest names in the city start having problems, the entire ecosystem feels it. This tweet landed at a very specific moment in the Memphis rap scene. At the beginning of February 2016, Yo Gotti had just announced the release date for his long-awaited album, The Art of Hustle. It was a project he had been hyping for years, and fans were finally preparing to hear it when it dropped on February 19, 2016. But just days after that announcement, something unexpected happened. About a week after Gotti revealed his album date, and just one day before Young Dolph went on Twitter calling him his biggest hater, Dolph made his own announcement. On February 9th, Dolph revealed that he too would be dropping a new album. And not just any album. His project would also be released on February 19th, the exact same day as Yo Gotti's album. But the real shock came from the title. The album was called King of Memphis. That phrase wasn't random. For years, Yo Gotti had publicly referred to himself as the King of Memphis. It was a title he repeated in interviews, songs, and performances. In Memphis, that title carried weight. It symbolized status, influence, and dominance within the city's rap scene. So when Dolph announced an album with that exact name, the rap community immediately interpreted it as a direct challenge. Yo Gotti never publicly responded, but to many observers, the message was clear. Young Dolph was positioning himself as a rival to the throne. The beef goes public. Later that month, Dolph attempted to soften the situation during a series of interviews promoting the album. During appearances on Hot 97's Ebro in the Morning and The Breakfast Club, Dolph downplayed the idea that he was directly targeting Gotti. When asked about the title track, Dolph explained that everyone should see themselves as a king. He framed the concept as aspirational rather than confrontational. But the streets interpreted it differently.
And so did members of Yo Gotti's camp. The tension escalated quickly. Black Youngster enters the conflict. The situation took a far more aggressive turn the following month. In 2015, Yo Gotti had signed Memphis rapper Black Youngster to his CMG label. Youngster was known for his wild personality, viral antics, and unapologetic loyalty to Gotti. On March 2, 2016, Black Youngster posted a video on Instagram directly threatening Young Dolph. He said that if he ever saw Dolph in person, he would slap him. This wasn't a subliminal diss track. This was a man on camera making direct threats, and it didn't stop there. Youngster later filmed himself driving through South Memphis, the very neighborhood where Dolph grew up. In the video, he appeared heavily armed and claimed he was looking for Dolph to confront him face-to-face. Later that same day, Youngster and his crew walked through Dolph's neighborhood filming themselves, seemingly trying to prove that they were serious, but they never ran into him. Dolph responded in his own way by tweeting a laughing emoji and a thumbs down. Publicly, he appeared unfazed, but the feud was now impossible to ignore. Yo Gotti tries to distance himself. Throughout all of this, Yo Gotti continued to publicly distance himself from the conflict. On March 12th, Gotti addressed the situation during an interview. While he still refused to acknowledge any personal beef with Dolph, he did comment on Black Youngster's behavior. Gotti said he didn't approve of the way Youngster handled the situation. "My advice? I don't move like that," he explained. He also said he always encouraged younger artists to handle situations differently. In other words, Gotti positioned himself as someone above the drama. But Dolph didn't believe that narrative. In a now-deleted Instagram clip, Dolph allegedly suggested that Gotti was still angry because Dolph refused to sign with CMG. Dolph reportedly said something along the lines of, "I guess you still mad because I didn't sign with you." He also dragged another name into the situation, Gucci Mane. At the time, Gotti had previously fallen out with Gucci Mane, while Dolph continued collaborating with him. Dolph suggested that Gotti might have been upset about that as well. Memphis politics. This is where the layers of the story become complicated. Memphis rap beefs are rarely just about two individuals. They involve entire camps, labels, neighborhoods, and affiliations. Every move Dolph made was felt by people connected to Gotti. Every move Gotti's camp made was felt by people around Dolph, and both artists were tied to broader networks within Memphis street culture. Music, reputation, and street credibility were often intertwined. The first major escalation. For the rest of 2016, the tension continued but without major violence. Black Youngster even appeared on The Breakfast Club later that year and claimed that his beef with Dolph was over.
For a moment, things appeared to calm down. But that peace didn't last long. In February 2017, the feud exploded again, this time through music. Dolph released a diss track titled "Play With Yo Bitch," and this time there was no subtlety. He mentioned Yo Gotti by name. The song also contained references to a personal relationship with a woman connected to Gotti's circle, something widely interpreted as a deeply disrespectful move. Gotti responded with his own track, titled "Don't Beef With Me." Dolph fired back again with a music video for "Play With Yo Bitch" that featured a Yo Gotti lookalike. The line had been drawn. The Charlotte shooting. Then, things took a terrifying turn. The very next day after the diss track began circulating, Young Dolph's bulletproof SUV was ambushed in Charlotte, North Carolina. More than 100 rounds were fired into the vehicle. 100 bullets. And somehow, Dolph survived. Reports later suggested that the SUV had been armored, which likely saved his life. Even more shocking, despite the attack, Dolph performed a concert that same night. The shooting sent shockwaves through the hip-hop community, because this was no longer music. This looked like attempted murder. Investigators later discovered that the vehicle used in the shooting had allegedly been rented by Black Youngster. That discovery immediately fueled speculation that the attack was directly tied to the Memphis rap feud. Arrests and denials. On May 16, 2017, Black Youngster turned himself in to police in connection with the Charlotte shooting. However, Youngster denied any involvement. Later, he released a song titled "Birthday," where he claimed he had been framed. In the track, Youngster even suggested that Dolph might have shot his own vehicle to create publicity. To this day, the full truth behind the Charlotte shooting remains disputed. The case never fully resolved the competing claims. The Hollywood shooting. Then, things took another terrifying turn. The very next day after the diss track began circulating, Young Dolph's bulletproof SUV was
Yo Gotti was never charged. He was never formally accused. But in the court of public opinion and on the streets of Memphis, people continued speculating. Turning violence into music. After surviving the Hollywood shooting, Dolph leaned fully into the narrative. He released his album, Bulletproof. The lead single was called 100 Shots. The title referenced the Charlotte attack, where over 100 rounds were fired into his SUV. Dolph turned his survival into music. He turned it into branding. He turned it into a message. Was it real or promotion? Some observers began questioning whether the entire feud was partly marketing. After all, the timing of album releases, diss tracks, and public drama often aligned perfectly with promotional cycles. But there was one undeniable fact. The bullets were real. The hospital stays were real. And eventually, the body count would become very real too. The calm before the storm. After the Hollywood shooting in 2017, the feud seemed to quiet down. For nearly 4 years, the conflict appeared dormant. No major diss tracks, no public confrontations, no shootings connected to the feud. Young Dolph continued focusing on his career. In 2020, he released his album Rich Slave, which debuted at number 4 on the Billboard 200, the highest charting project of his career. He was making more money than ever, but he was also giving back. Dolph donated $25,000 to Hamilton High School, his former school in Memphis. He regularly visited students who encouraged them to pursue education and bigger dreams. Every year, he hosted Thanksgiving turkey giveaways for families in his neighborhood. Dolph was building something bigger than rap. He was building a legacy. November 17, 2021. And then suddenly, everything came crashing down. November 17, 2021, a Wednesday, 1 week before Thanksgiving. According to police reports, 2 men stepped out of a stolen Mercedes-Benz outside Makeda's homemade butter cookies in South Memphis. Inside the shop, Young Dolph was buying cookies. Moments later, gunshots rang out. That is the simplest version of what happened, but the full story behind that moment would reveal a chain of events that had been building for years.